Video games. As the interactive medium has evolved to become more complex, we've been introduced to a wide array of characters that can be described as well-written, relatable, humorous, and other similar accolades. And with the many characters I've gotten to know over the years, I feel like talking about 10 of my personal favorites. Just a few things to mention before I start, though. Firstly, given the nature of this list, the characters here are only from games I've played thus far, and there will only be one representative per franchise. Second, this is not a best characters list, but instead a favorite characters list. I'm ranking these characters based on how fondly I remember them, including impact, relatability, or simply character traits I find appealing. Third, as always, I highly encourage you to list some of your favorites in the comments section below. With all that said and done, I'd say some introductions are in order.
Number 10.
When I was a very young lad, Banjo Kazooie on N64 was about all I had. It was a wonderful game with humor that was its main acclaim. Its best character was a sorceress, plotting from her facade fortress. Her name was Gruntilda Winky Bunny, with all the charm of a red onion. Make no mistake, however, for her writing is truly the most clever. Speaking entirely in rhyme, her remarks were in their prime.
And then Banjo Kazooie happened and she temporarily stopped speaking in rhyme.
But really, Grunty belts out quips in rhymes as if they were nothing, and her commentary is hard not to laugh at. Plus, you have to admire her persistence of coming back for revenge in each game with less of her original body laugh, as well as her strange but charming love for quiz questions. She's otherwise the stock one-dimensional evil witch, but played in such a way to make her a villain that many will admit to liking. Good on you, Rareware staff.
Number 9.
The Touhou series is known for its massive cast of characters, as well as the devoted fanbase that often helps influence each character's personality in each future installment. One of the series' most popular characters from the moment of her debut, however, is Kochiya Sane, the deified human of the wind. Sane's backstory immediately helps her stand out in Touhou's cast, seeing as she's the reincarnation of a goddess but is originally from Earth instead of Gensokyo. For this reason, she sees her job of exterminating yokai as something similar to a video game, and both the official games and the fandom have had fun in making Sane subtly reference various video games and anime. However, given that it's usually the Touhou fandom that fleshes out the characters' personalities, Sane isn't given much screen time that isn't shared with other characters, and the chances of her getting her own spin-off don't seem too high right now. Still, she's a lovable and geeky lass, and some of that relatability is what helps her stand out even more. I'd much rather follow a Touhou game story with a character I can relate to, rather than some more of the blank slate type characters.
Number 8.
If you know me fairly well, you'll know I love learning about history, so the fact that I play a lot of Dynasty Warriors and Samurai Warriors games should come as no surprise. But if you thought picking Sane Kochiya as my favorite Touhou character was the only meta these choices would get, well, surprise, because we're getting even more meta with the Warriors representative of this list, Mori Motonari. Motonari debuted as a playable officer in Samurai Warriors 3, where he was characterized by his love of history and pacifistic nature. Wanting to withdraw from the ongoing wars and return to his studies, he fakes his death before being pulled out of his retirement to go on a secondary military campaign that's anachronistic as hell. Thankfully though, the future installments were more historically accurate with Motonari's story, while also preserving his mature and level-headed personality that makes him an efficient and respectable military commander, as well as a caring father for his sons. Motonari doesn't need to rule over his army using fear. He's essentially a father figure to his army, to emphasize on his desire to leave a legacy for his sons to follow, especially after Takakage became playable in Samurai Warriors 4. And it's that fatherly demeanor that makes Motonari such an interesting character.
A lot better than that other interpretation of Mori Motonari.
Number 7.
Etrian Odyssey the Millennium Girl was an interesting step forward for the Etrian Odyssey series, seeing as it gave you the option to play through the game with pre-made characters instead of letting your imagination mold your party members as you wanted. These new characters were actually a really likable bunch, and believe me when I say that picking one favorite from these 5 wasn't easy, but in the end, I would consider my favorite to be Rakuna Sheldon. Hailing from the still snowy lands of post-apocalyptic Ontario, Rakuna is a member of the Midgard Library trio alongside Simon and Arthur, and she's quite the admirable fighter, seeing as she's the most brave-hearted of the group, but knows when a risk is too much of a gamble, and is quite outgoing and cordial despite her noble lineage. In fact, you'd hardly assume she was royalty, given her brash yet also playful personality that makes her charming from the minute she steps into the picture. As a member of the Protector class, she's pretty crucial to the party's survival by building up your defenses and shielding other party members, yet she can hold her own as a decent offensive unit too, playing off of her personality quite well. And if you thought this last wasn't charming enough, she's voiced by Erin Fitzgerald. Yes, that Erin Fitzgerald.
Number 6.
There's only one word to describe Sengoku Basara's interpretation of Date Masamune. Badass. Infectiously badass. Badass enough to make me want to be a badass and do badass things, even though I probably wouldn't look like much of a badass trying to imitate Masamune. Regardless, it's difficult to play any Sengoku Basara game without getting attached to Masamune in some way, considering that he must be Dante's long-lost Japanese brother or something. Everything he does has that distinctive Dante-esque flair and banter, yet Masamune is a very honorable fighter, seeing as he puts the recovery of the Oshu region as a higher priority than his revenge against Mitsunari. And even after achieving said revenge, he doesn't kill Mitsunari, having only wanted to even the score. Even in Masamune's rivalry with fellow poster character Sanada Yukimura, he's quite respectful of his rival's abilities and passion. Sure, he can be hot-headed and a show-off at times, but he has every right to be, considering how loyal and well-organized his army is. And even though he's meant to be Dante's Japanese parallel, there are quite some clever references to history in his design, strategies, and even his habit of using broken English in the Japanese dubs of the games. He's a cunning warrior with a sense of honor and style that he brings to every battlefield across Japan. And whenever you decide to follow through his route through loose Japanese history, you best be ready to...
Number 5.
Warning! The top 5 favorite characters all have spoiler warnings in place. While I'm not giving away the identities of the games being covered in these final segments, this disclaimer serves as a warning that such territory is all that remains of this list. That said, let's get the final 5 started. Muramasa the Demon Blade was a Wii game that never really got the attention it deserved, at least until it got a remake on the PlayStation Vita, but the story is full of some interesting characters, human and non-human Japanese spirits alike. And if you've ever wanted to know where the Kitsune part of my namesake owes some of its thanks to, meet Yuzuruha. Yuzuruha is a kitsune, or fox spirit, serving under Inari, the patron deity of foxes. She's only encountered in Kisuke's story, but she's responsible for kickstarting his long journey, since she bestows Kisuke with the crucial ability to forge Muramasa blades. She spends much of the remainder of the story guiding the amnesiac Kisuke by giving you advice at save points, as well as a recap of the story's major events in case you pick up the game after a while or simply forget where to go. But where most of my admiration for her character is how her personality is finally in tune with the mythology of the loyal fox spirit. Sure, she can be a bit of a tease, but she's very much motivated by loyalty and care for Kisuke, best shown in Kisuke's default ending. After Kisuke begins to regain his memories and realize his love for Torahime, she's killed off by a demon-possessed shogun, and Kisuke commits suicide after exorcising said demon. Kisuke and Torahime are reincarnated, but with no memory of their previous lives. Despite this, Yuzuruha, having recognized the pair, is sent to pair them back together again, even if they don't acknowledge the spiritual aid or even remember each other. There's a very serene aura to Yuzuruha, and while she may not be the most fleshed out character of the top 5, there's still quite a bit that her role in the story says, and it's all gracefully presented despite that.
Number 4.
At this point, you're probably recognizing a pattern here. I tend to prefer the more level-headed and respectful characters, and this pattern continues with my favorite character from Eternal Sonata, Jazz. Jazz is the leader of the Andantino rebels, and has shown strong leadership traits since his youth. He's a very serious and driven man known for leading with a fair hand, neither being too punishing nor too lenient. Having failed a previous revolution against the government of Forte, Jazz is keen to avoid picking fights he cannot confidently wage. Because of this, he's seen very highly by the Andantino forces, even coming off as a slight father figure because of how he manages his forces. In fact, there's a theory that the playable cast of Eternal Sonata represents different facets of Chopin's personality, which would mean that Jazz represents the man that Chopin always aspired to be, but never could be due to his physical illness. Jazz overcame his setbacks to organize the Andantino forces, and is neither brooding from his past failure nor boasting his strength. Heck, he's the only playable character who can deal 2 hits in each attack and has the highest physical strength, yet he never really brags about it. Overall, Jazz is a commander who places the highest priority in how to accomplish a goal and the best way to get to it confidently. And that's what makes him so admirable amongst the cast of Eternal Sonata and its players.
Number 3.
Allow me to ruin the established mood with just one word here.
Sardine!
Meet Valvatores, the protagonist of Disgaea 4 and the greatest vampire to ever grace the world of marine biology. Formerly a tyrant feared across the netherworld, Valvatores was brought down by his honor to never break a promise, most notably when he met a human woman named Artina, who did not fear the tyrant at all. Refusing to drink the blood of anyone unafraid of him, Valvatores made a promise to have Artina as his next victim, only for her to be killed before that could happen. Valvatores, still refusing to break his promise, became weaker weaker from his abstinence from human blood. By the time the game begins, Valvatorez is a shadow of his former self and has grown comically dependent on sardines as an alternative for blood. While the Disgaea series is already known for balancing its comedic and darker elements, it's interesting that Valvatorez is much nobler compared to most other demons in the series, as well as taking his friendships and promises very seriously. And while he organizes a revolution within the underworld, he shows no interest in taking over as its leader or using cheap tactics to claim victory. Sure, he can be gullible and has a one-trick mind on many occasions, but for a demon he's very admirable in most aspects of his personality. And don't you dare think you're getting away without a dose of sardine trivia. Did you know that eating sardines with bones gives you more calcium than a supplement? Ooh! Or that they—
Number 2.
Now here's a shocker. For those of you who've been following my channel for a good while, you'll recall that I put Vert at the apex of my top 10 Hyperdimension Neptunia characters, and with quite some serious praise. I'll try to keep from sounding like a broken record, but here goes. In Hyperdimension Neptunia, the main characters are representations of video game companies, and Lady Greenheart, better known as Vert, is the representation of Microsoft. While at first glance, you might say she's just a fodder fanservice character, what with her blonde hair, blue eyes, and voluptuous figure, she ends up being an incredibly likable character because of how mature and level-headed she is. Not to mention that she's also an even more relatable character because of how much of a hardcore gamer slash otaku she is. Try reading some of her dialogue on her gaming habits without chuckling from knowing that you can relate. However, considering the Neptunia franchise has essentially oversaturated itself in the market as of late, I can't help but feel like this has toned down some of the quality of the character personalities. And that's one of the main reasons why Vert isn't at the top of this list. Still, she's a very relatable and likable character for her mostly mature and composed personality, even though she's also shown some bouts of ignorance and pride, as well as immaturity. She's still my favorite character in the series, but I really can't help but feel that her charm is being slightly run into the ground with all of the Hyperdimension Neptunia releases made in the past year and a half.
Number 1.
The Banner Saga is a game that doesn't take a minute to drive home how grim its setting is. And while it does juggle the role of protagonist a bit, for the majority of the game, you experience the godless and frozen lands from the viewpoint of Rook, a hunter from the town of Skogar. Within the first segment of Rook's side of the story, he and his daughter Alette encounter the monstrous Dredge as they attack Skogar, leaving Rook as the de facto chief of the village's survivors as they march to seek safe haven from the Dredge. In Rook's scenarios, the game emphasizes the theme of leadership. As Rook, you make the army's core decisions, and these aren't obvious choices either. Some may yield unexpected results, while others will cost you travelers and morale. In one particular scenario, a backstabbing Onef even says to Rook that he cannot hope to survive by trusting everyone he comes across. Essentially, Rook plays the role of the father, both figuratively in that his decisions decide the safety and well-being of his army, and literally in that he seeks to protect his daughter Alette, having already failed to protect his wife. Yet at the same time, Alette seeks to prove her worth as a hunter, and many of the choices Rook makes regard whether to let her aid the army or to protect her from possible harm. Managing the army as Rook honestly feels like making fatherly choices in both the literal and figurative senses. And no matter what choices you make, Rook's logic for many of them isn't anything far out, and as a character he's caring and generally calm, but can also be a good mediator or strict leader when the caravan is in rough shape. When I played the Banner Saga for the first time, Rook immediately had my interest, and while it was primarily due to his usefulness in battle at first, as the game progressed, I came to relate to Rook and appreciate what writing went into his role in the story. Rook is no god or legendary hero. He's a common man who only wishes to protect his only child, only to be thrust into a long journey that has him making many deep moral choices, ultimately culminating in the greatest decision, whether to have himself or Alette attempt to deal the death blow to a Dredge whose strength borders on immortality, knowing well that whoever chooses to fire the arrow will not likely live to tell the tale. His struggle to live through a dystopian realm as a father and human being is what helps make the Banner Saga such an interesting game, and his respectful, if not also relatable, personality makes him who I'd consider to be my favorite video game character I've had the pleasure of meeting. I'm the Kitsune Hawk, and I look forward to seeing the continuation of the Banner of Skogar this winter.